So a lot of Florida fans have been asking me this question. JT, you believe Miami's going to beat Florida week 1, but what happens if Florida wins? And that's a very good question, so let's talk about it. So let's speculate the Gators find a way to pull off the win at home against Miami. They win 27-20 in a hard-fought competitive game, right? What a win means for Florida in this game is that the Billy Napier hot seat talk starts to cool off a little bit, and you end up starting the season off on a really high note. This win will be a great tone setter for Florida because their over-under win total is 4.5 wins. And you got the toughest schedule in America this year. So a win against Miami gives you confidence that, okay, if we can beat Miami, we can definitely beat UCF, Kentucky, and we can beat the teams that we got a fair shot at beating or we are expected to be favored to beat. And maybe you could pull off an upset or two if Miami still ends up being the team that most people believe they could be this year if everything goes right. Maybe Miami ends up losing this game because the swamp is just too much for them, right? And for Miami, from a Hurricane fan standpoint, a loss in this game would be a tragedy for Mario Cristobal's job security, because then the pressure on him starts to rise because you are expected to win this game. Although you're a small 2.5 point favorite to do so, you got Cam Ward, Damian Martinez. Those were arguably two of the best players at their position in this past transfer portal cycle. You got an experienced offensive line. You're deep at wide receiver. You hit the portal heavy to improve the interior of your defense. There's no excuse why Miami, being a more talented team than Florida, should lose this game. And this would be one of the few times where you will look at Miami losing this rivalry game and be truly disappointed. Because in years past, when Miami has played Florida, it wasn't really that big of a shock that Florida was winning those games because Florida, at that moment, were the better program than the Canes. But right now, both of these two teams have been down for so long, and Miami has out-recruited and out-portaled Florida these last couple of years. So you expect to win this game if you're Miami. And this gets your season off to a really bad start because your schedule is manageable, but your margin of error is fairly low if you still want to get into the college football playoffs. Because let's say you don't win the ACC this year and you end up being the at-large bid. This loss ends up hurting you if Florida ends up just imploding right after and they end up being as bad as expected. And if Florida wins this game, you would think that Florida is in for a year where they end up shocking us all and they over-exceed expectations because Miami is a pretty good team. And I know that the national media is pretty high on Miami nearly every year. They think they're going to be back. But there's truly a great reason to be high on the Canes this year that they're going to live up to expectations. They can end up winning 10 games and make a playoff berth. And what this win for Florida would also show me is that their defense has improved tremendously under Austin Armstrong. The Hurricanes are going to be a well-balanced team. They're going to smash you on the ground with Damian Martinez. They got more than great depth at that running back position as well behind him. And Cam Ward should be able to expose this secondary. But with the win in this game, it shows that the defense has improved with their consistency, not giving up a lot of big plays, being better at communicating. You don't see as many blown coverages as what you've seen last year. And the pass rush is also pretty good as well, despite losing your top pass rusher to Ole Miss. So if Florida beats Miami, it would be great for starting this season off, Billy Napier having all this pressure on him. It makes his seat a little bit more comfortable to sit on. He doesn't have to blow on it anymore. It's fairly hot, but it's not scorching hot. But the hot seat for Mario Cristobal starts to heat up. Now, I'm not going to say that after this game, people are going to start saying you got to fire Mario Cristobal, but now the margin of error becomes increasingly thin. You better win the rest of your games. You better beat Florida State too, because if you lose to Florida and FSU in the same season, that isn't going to sit right with anybody in that program or the fan base, because you out-recruit every other Florida program. You shouldn't be losing to both of them. So that would be a huge detriment, not just to Mario Cristobal, but to Miami's perception in recruiting. Because you want to be able to sell Miami as a team that is on the rise and you're trying to get back to the glory days. But with the loss to Florida and maybe Florida State, it's hard to sell recruits on what you're trying to sell in terms of the direction that Miami football is heading if you go 0-2 against two teams in the state of Florida, two of the top tier programs in the state of Florida.